The judge is here, Andrew Napolitano, and I'm very glad to call him the host of Judging Freedom, because our freedom now hangs in the balance. Judge Napolitano, thanks for joining us. There's so much I'd like to talk to you about. I know that you are friendly with Donald Trump. I don't want to be insulting to him, but I thought he embarrassed your country at the United Nations yesterday. What did you think?
Well, George, it's always a pleasure to be with you, my dear friend, and apologies for my coming on not at the appointed time. And thank you for your generosity by giving me this time with you. I thought he embarrassed the United States and embarrassed himself with the rantings and ravings against the United Nations and about climate control. And then even worse, George, the statements he made afterwards about Ukraine, that Ukraine can, in his word, all in caps, win and actually take back Crimea and the Donbass and all the regions now returned by the Russian military to the Russian Federation. This type of statement is inconceivable. Not only is it not possible, it's not even conceivable. It's not even worthy of discussing, other than to try and figure out what's in the man's brain. The best I can say is that he's teasing everybody and wants to throw people off. The worst I can say is he listens to whoever he's been speaking to last, which in this case was probably either Sebastian Gorka or General Keith Kellogg, because the two of them are of this view that with enough military equipment, Ukraine, which has very little left of its military, can somehow send the Russians home packing. They do not understand the origins of the war. The origins of the war are the United States of America and NATO. NATO expanding to Russian borders, and the United States, along with the British intelligence, CIA and MI6, candidly probably led by MI6, perpetrated a coup against the popularly elected and relatively neutral president in 2014 in Ukraine. And then when Trump came into the White House, he armed Ukraine to the teeth. And then, of course, he was no longer a president, and Joe Biden decided to fund this war. So I'm very disappointed in President Trump. I am equally disappointed, George, in Gaza. This is one of the most horrific events in the post-World War II era. The Congress of the United States and the White House are in a vice grip controlled by the American Zionist oligarchs who don't know if they have dirt on Donald Trump. I don't know if they have threatened Donald Trump. I know they have given his campaigns enormous amounts of money. The public in America is turning on the Netanyahu regime. This has nothing to do with the Jewish people or so-called anti-Semitism. This is a revulsion at what the criminal apartheid government of Israel is doing to the poor people of Gaza, and Donald Trump doesn't lift a finger against it. I'm sorry I went on so long, George, but I wanted to give you my thoughts about Trump on all three areas: what he said at the UN, what he's doing with Ukraine, and what he's doing with Gaza.
Your Honor, you could never go on too long for me. I could listen to you, and frequently have listened to you all night. Let's take the issues seriatim. I was in Moscow when the Truth Social post was made. I was in Moscow when the speech at the UN was made. I told our earlier guest, our good friend Daniel McAdam, the stock market in Moscow crashed. It fell very substantially. And the public mood was, well, it looks like that war that Donald Trump was going to solve in 24 hours will probably still be going on 24 months from now. It's quite clear, unless Trump was joking, unless he's going to pull a rabbit out of a hat tomorrow, that Trump has given NATO, and by the way, Your Honor, he keeps referring to NATO as a third party, in the third person, as if America wasn't in NATO, as if America wasn't the main thing in NATO, and paying almost 3/4 of its costs. He's basically saying, well, NATO can make war on them if it likes, as if he wasn't its leader. But whichever way you dice it, this week seems to suggest that this war in Ukraine is going to drag on and on and on, and will be settled only on the battlefield.
Well, our two mutual friends who are military experts, the great Scott Ritter, actually three, the great Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson and the great Colonel Douglas McGregor, agree with you that it'll be settled on the battlefield, but they don't think it's going to go on for 24 months because there just will not be enough human beings alive in the Ukrainian military to use the military equipment that NATO will be sending to it. General Kellogg made this ridiculous statement recently. If Putin had a real army, he'd be in Kyiv right now. Well, Putin doesn't want to be in Kyiv. President Putin's goal is to degrade the Ukrainian military so that the Russian people don't have to go through this for the next 20 years. And how General Kellogg, a retired 3-star general, cannot understand that must mean that he's blinded by ideology. But I agree with you entirely. Even in the Truth Social, Trump refers to his own tweets as truth. Even in the Truth Social, where he referred to Ukraine can win, he said with the help of NATO. Of course, as you say, forgetting that for every dollar spent, 75 cents of it came from the United States. He also seems to forget that the CIA is on the ground in Ukraine, helping identify Russian targets for Ukrainian military. And the American military is in Wiesbaden, Germany, helping to direct the propulsion of American and British missiles against Russian troops. He seems to forget that those events, those processes, only occur with his permission, a permission he could terminate with a telephone call. So,
and of course,
if he's joking,
the satellites also, Judge.
Correct.
The American satellites are completely indispensable. The war would end if American intelligence from American satellites was discontinued.
Correct. You alluded to the fact that his bizarre statement about Ukraine can win might be a joke. There are a lot of people here in the U.S. and friends of yours and mine in Moscow with whom I communicated today who do believe it might be a joke. But George, if it's a joke, it's a sad, sick joke, which is a window into a mind that I don't want to go there because I'm afraid what I'm going to find.
Well, I know you don't want to go there, and because I've tested that before with you, and I don't want to spoil or despoil in any way your relationship with Donald Trump. But my thoughts at the end of his free-form stream of consciousness was that this is not a well man.
No, I'm sorry to say I agree with you, George. I mean, he's my friend, but I'm in this same business that you are. And like you, I have to be intellectually honest. And I'm sorry that I agree with you. A friend of mine texted me last night when this bizarre statement came out and said, this is 25th Amendment territory. The 25th Amendment allows the vice president and a majority of the president's cabinet to depose him. Now, I don't think that that's going to happen, but the person that said this to me is someone for whose intellect I have enormous respect, and it has people thinking, to use the language of the streets, there are some screws loose up there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's turn, Your Honor, to Gaza. Donald Trump met with all the Arab leaders, many of them heads of state, presidents. The Emir of Qatar was there. President Erdogan of Turkey was there. Most of the Arab and Muslim countries were represented at the meeting. Donald Trump said it was his most important meeting of this current session of the General Assembly. What could he have said to them, though? If they're that important, and I agree they are, to America's interests, to the interests of stability in the world, bringing to an end slaughter and so on, what could he have said to them about the fact that the Palestinians are being massacred in plain sight? The West Bank is being settled by illegal settlers in plain sight, that Israel has declared there will be no Palestinian state. What's left to talk about? How does Donald Trump square that with these Arab and Muslim leaders?
You know, he not only has, it's a great question, George. He not only has the tendency of repeating what has been whispered into his ear last. I suggested Sebastian Gorka, who's a notorious whisperer and who's almost always with him, and who's a fanatic Zionist and a fanatic neocon. But he also has a tendency to want to please his audience. The statement about Ukraine winning was made in the presence of President Zelensky. So Trump, who has a weakness in that he wants to be loved, often says what he thinks the audience wants to hear. Look, my heart is exactly where yours is, but I have no praise for those Arab leaders with whom he met. They are gutless. The Emir of Qatar should have said, "Get out of our air base. You're going to allow this to happen. You're going to reduce our air defenses. You're going to turn off our radar. You're not a friend or an ally. You're a tool of Bibi Netanyahu." And Erdogan should say, "We're not going to sell the Israelis any more oil. Not a drop of oil. I don't care if my oil companies go bankrupt. I'm going to stop the slaughter in Gaza." We have another mutual friend that we both like and admire, my former Fox colleague and fellow podcaster, and still my friend, and I know yours, Tucker Carlson. Tucker 2 days ago, while interviewing Glenn Greenwald, said that he has spoken to people in Israel who have been in Benjamin Netanyahu's presence and have heard Netanyahu boast that he controls Trump and he controls the Congress of the United States, boasting and bragging about it. I believe that Tucker believes the accuracy and honesty of those in Israel who told him this. And Tucker, notwithstanding what happened to Charlie Kirk, has the moral courage and backbone to say this on his show. And I'm going to guess you agree with me. None of this surprises me, George.
None of it surprises me, but I'm being surprised hourly. And I'm grateful for your time, Judge. And this is the last question, but it's a big one. I'm being surprised hourly by the evidence that is emerging, which is not conclusive in one form or another yet. But one thing is clear to me, that the FBI, Kash Patel, official narrative of how Charlie was killed is not only untrue, but cannot be true. And if they're lying about the weapon, If they're lying about the shooter, that means they're lying about everything, and that means there's a big conspiracy involved in this case. What's your take?
It's hard for me to believe that this crazy young man in love with somebody who's half a man and half a woman, as bizarre as that is, could have pulled this off on his own for the reasons stated in his email, in his text messages to the lover and to others. I haven't looked at all of the evidence. I will examine what has come out in the past 2 days, and I'll examine it wearing my judicial hat with perfect neutrality, as if I didn't know and didn't like Charlie, and as if I respected the FBI. But I got to tell you, the FBI has no respect, commands no respect in this country, whether it's run by Bob Ray or Jim Comey or Bob Mueller or Kash Patel. There's just no respect for the FBI any longer. But the truth will have to come out. We do know that Charlie was under tremendous pressure. See the interview he gave my another former Fox colleague and dear friend and friend of yours, Megyn Kelly, after he was browbeaten by Bill Ackman and a bunch of wealthy American Zionist billionaires. They offered him $100 million in financing if he would change his views on Netanyahu and the slaughter in Gaza, and he turned them down. See how he is shaking during this interview with Megyn, which is just 2 days later. This was all a month before he was murdered. And for those who rejoice in the beautiful words of Mrs. Kirk, who forgave her husband's murderer, and her words were beautiful. You know what her father is retired from doing as a living? He's an Israeli arms merchant.
I'm almost speechless to learn that, and I've only time now to ask you about the rally with all of our friends that you've got coming up.
Oh, that's so good of you.
Where it is,
that's so
and
good
how
of you to
people
mention
can
that.
support it.
Our wonderful friend, Gerald Celente, who fights every day for peace, runs a rally the last Saturday of every September in a town called Kingston, New York, which is arguably the birthplace of democracy in America. The rally draws about 400 or 500 people, zero media. The media refuses to cover it because it's always an anti-war rally. The speakers will be, in addition to Gerald, the great former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, the great former CIA agent who now thinks the CIA should be disbanded, Ray McGovern, the great former Marine and campaigner for peace, Scott Ritter, the great songwriter and singer Roger Waters, Gerald Celente himself, Joe Loria, who runs Consortium News, and your humble correspondent. And we will bring the house down with arguments on freedom of speech, war and peace, the proper role of the government in our lives. But as I said to you, George, there will be zero media there. They couldn't care less what we say. It doesn't deter us. It energizes us. This is in Kingston, New York. If you live anywhere in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut metropolitan area, this Saturday, no admission fee, this Saturday, September 27th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, local time.
There's nowhere in the world I'd rather be than there. Alas, I cannot be. I wouldn't get past the border control. But if I could teletransport myself, like Baron Trump in the 1890s, being teletransported onto Times Square by a rocket man called Elon, I would be in Kingston, New York. What
well,
a platform.
If you were in
Gerald
Kingston, New York, the size of the crowd would grow in multiples.